This morning, they revealed the PlayStation 5 Pro, which was heavily leaked and everybody knew that this was coming. But they actually revealed it officially, PS5 Pro. And Matt Cerny showed up.
Take just a minute to look at what we put in the original PlayStation 5 and how it delivers an exceptional gaming experience.
So he does kind of like a roundup of what they've done so far, of what the previous PS5 was capable of. And then he starts going through some of the shortcomings. But the interesting thing about these types of reveals is they can't put down the old product, right? They can't say it's bad because they still want a lot of people to buy it. Because this is not the PlayStation 6 where they're stopping the PS5. This is the PlayStation 5 Pro. This is supposed to be another option if you're wanting to buy a PS5. For some people, it'll be just a straight up upgrade. But for a lot of people, like, this is potentially their first step into the generation. So Sony can't badmouth the PS5. So they have to kind of toe this line of saying, like, the PS5 is an amazing piece of technology. They always do this with their hands for some reason. It's an amazing piece of technology, but we think we can go further. So look at this. We have the fidelity mode. And if we crank these settings and we introduce this technology, we can achieve higher frame rates. And to me, I don't find it to be that compelling a pitch, honestly, because there's demonstrably shortcomings this generation, I think, with a lot of the hardware, but it feels like they're just walking the line. And I do think you're right, Rockley. They follow in the line of just putting AI on everything. So it's like, oh, we have this. Oops, I didn't. We have this. We have fidelity mode. How could we make this sound even more cutting edge and, perhaps most importantly, get investors like super excited? I know. There we go. AI fidelity mode. That's like the extent of it. Just throw AI on anything and it's supposed to be way better. But let's continue. Let's hear him out. He's going to describe how fidelity mode / performance mode is one of the big decisions right now. But he actually revealed a stat that, as far as I know, was not made public before, and you'll see it. Specifically, how many people are choosing performance mode versus graphics mode. If you haven't watched this, what do you think the percentage is?
Modes emphasize the visuals, typically through higher resolution rendering. These modes might also have enhanced detail or use more ray tracing. But the games only run at 30 frames per second.
Yeah, yicky, icky, gross. 30 frames? What am I, a farmer?
The visuals can be choppier and the controls less responsive. Performance modes emphasize frame rate and interactivity, typically choosing to run at 60 frames per second. Mainly by reducing the graphical detail until those frame rates can be achieved.
Now, real quick, I do want to defend Sony on one point here. One of the stupidest narratives I've seen so far today, which is people pulling up the Twitter version of the video, or X, whatever, and comparing those side by sides. If you don't know this somehow, I'm sorry. Twitter compression, X compression for video and pictures is unbelievably bad. Like, if you have any detail in a picture or a video, do not put it, for the love of God, on Twitter or X. Like, just don't. It will make it look like your screen is covered in Vaseline. On YouTube, it's still a problem. The bit rates are always not great. They've started doing, what's it called? AV1 encoding with like VP9. And if you pull up stats for nerds on YouTube, you can actually see what codec they're using. This is VP9, which is a much better codec than like H.264 and things like that, that they use. But the point is, YouTube's better. YouTube's a lot better, but it's still a common issue, is that compression in these videos makes it hard to kind of see the difference. But I will say, when you zoom in on this with the full high bitrate selection on YouTube, oh God, what did I do? You can see a difference, you know, not just the pixelation around the head versus sharper edges over here. Density of foliage is also higher on the left versus the right. If you go far away, you can see a lot more detail over on the left versus far away on the right. So there is a difference. Is it night and day? Is it like, oh God, this is a generational leap? No, it's not. And I think that that's where a lot of people are are coming from is they're looking at this like, okay, it's a $700 machine, spoiler alert, and it doesn't really seem like a huge leap. You have to really look for it, you know? You have to really look for the difference.
When asked to decide on a mode, players are choosing performance about 3/4 of the time.
Thank you, Carl, by the way. I see a lot of other people re-upping their memberships and follows and stuff. Thank you for that. I'll go through those in just a minute. Thank you, my friends. Thank you so much.
Removing that decision, or at least narrowing that divide, is one of the key targets for PlayStation 5 Pro.
Mark, he's a legend, no doubt. But he also seems like the kind of guy that drinks tea with every meal. You know what I mean? Do you get that vibe? There's just some people like that. He just seems like he drinks tea with every meal. Not a bad thing. Probably good for you. I should do that instead of having a bucket of coffee.
We want to give players the graphics that the game creators aspire to, at the high frame rates that players typically prefer. To do that, PS5 Pro substantially improves over PlayStation 5 in 3 ways. Here's what we call the big 3.
The biggest 3! The biggest 3. Larger GPU. Advanced ray tracing as opposed to not advanced ray tracing. And then AI, there's the buzzword, letter, whatever, driven upscaling. Let's see what this actually is.
First, we made the GPU much larger and increased the speed of the memory it uses. The result is rendering that's up to 45% faster.
Up to?
Second, we made major upgrades to the ray tracing, taking a streamlined and accelerated approach that allows calculation of the rays at double or even triple the speeds of PlayStation 5.
Again, I appreciate the improvement, but I will die on this hill, I think. I would much rather high quality baked lighting than ray tracing that halves the frame rate. I love ray tracing. I think it looks great. I play Cyberpunk with like the overdrive ray tracing stuff turned on because I am spoiled and very fortunate and I have a supercomputer that can run it. Even then, it greatly affects performance, and a lot of developers have not really mastered the fine art of optimizing it, and you pretty much have to rely on upscaling stuff to make it hit even decent frame rates. So I just think ray tracing, it can look really good, but for a lot of games, I feel like most people will never really appreciate it. And you can see it where ray tracing is often limited to the fidelity mode. And you're about to see, like, maybe he says it after this, or maybe he already said it. But basically, he says that about 3/4 of players play on performance mode, not on fidelity mode, which is crazy. It's like people are choosing to turn it off because they'd rather 60 frames. So I just don't think the ray tracing is that big of a sell. Maybe like 5 years ago, but.
And finally, we added custom hardware for machine learning and an AI library called PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR for short.
Also, I think we should pioneer the pronunciation, not PSSR. It's pisser. The PS5 Pro. It comes with an improved GPU, improved ray tracing hardware, and pisser.
PSSR analyzes the game images pixel by pixel and can add an extraordinary amount of detail, which boosts the effective resolution of the games. Game creators are adding PS5 Pro support to new and existing titles, and with the big 3 involved, the results can be pretty amazing.
Yeah, notice one of the noticeably absent things in the discussion of the big 3. They have improved like a bigger GPU, dedicated like or improved ray tracing stuff, which technically are the same thing, and then AI upscaling. So 2 of the 3 are the same thing, and then the other is pisser. So what's missing? Well, CPU enhancements and improvements. Any game that is CPU limited, this doesn't fix anything. Like, you can have a better GPU, but it doesn't affect it if you're CPU bound. So for example, like a lot of console games specifically are CPU limited because they develop for the lowest common denominator, and cranking the GPU can maybe, it's like the equivalent of cranking the texture quality in settings on a PC or something, but it won't actually like greatly improve frame rates or anything because that's not what's holding that back. It's the CPU is the bottleneck that's preventing everything. So it like won't actually do that much. The easiest way, because I'm a visual person, and I appreciate that if we just draw over this. The reason, and I say this just because I saw somebody in the comment section that was like, I don't understand why you're calling it a bottleneck. What does that name come from? It's because with a bottle, you have a bottle that comes to a point. This is the CPU. This is what's limiting the flow out of the bottle, right? Everybody on the same page? Cranking the GPU is great, but that's effectively just like making this bigger on the back end. It doesn't actually change how much can flow through. It maybe increases your capacity. All of this is added. So it did do something, but it's not actually going to change the flow of the liquid out of it, which is basically the frame rate. So as far as I can tell, for a lot of games, that's what they've done here, is they've allowed you to crank texture quality and stuff, but they haven't actually allowed you to crank frame rates, because the CPU is going to be the same. And that's, for a lot of games, the limiting factor.
With graphics showing something like fidelity levels of detail, but it doubled the frame rate. Here's The Last of Us Part 2 running on PS5 Pro.
I will give them credit for this. I was just playing The Last of Us Part 2 the other night. I was just feeling an itch to go and kill some scars. And so I loaded it up and went ham. And this does look much better than the version that's running on the PS5 now on performance mode. The specifically density of foliage.
It has huge amounts of detail and targets a super smooth 60 frames per second.
Yeah. And this is after compression. So I do think this looks really, really good. Does it look $700 good? You guys know me. I love spending money frivolously. It's a passion of mine. As a YouTuber, it's almost like an obligation to be irresponsible. And even I am struggling to justify it in my head, you know? Really struggling. And when you compare it side by side, again, compressed, it's kind of hard to tell because YouTube compression's doing its thing, even with it at 4K, highest possible bitrate. Even now, I think a lot of people are struggling to see the difference.
The fidelity mode on PS5.
Yeah, notice they go to fidelity mode, not performance mode. Like, looking at it side by side, I honestly am struggling to find a difference, but I think that's the point, is they're showing, hey, we can achieve the fidelity mode's quality, but at 60 frames over here. And so you're supposed to be like, wow, therefore I should get the PS5 Pro because I can play it on fidelity quality, but at 60 frames. Maybe a more fair side by side is to show me the performance mode. Let's see.
Which is only running at 30 frames per second and is therefore much choppier.
Don't stop! We gotta lose.
This goal of delivering almost fidelity-like graphics at performance frame rates has been achieved for a broad set of titles, including Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart.
Again, I think this is so important to notice. They are comparing it to the fidelity mode on PS5, not to the performance mode, because I think if they were to do performance mode, you'd be like, yeah, like it looks worse. The performance mode looks worse. They definitely turned off some bells and whistles, but like it doesn't look that much worse.
You can see that PS5 Pro is close to doubling the power of PlayStation 5. Another way to compare the two consoles is to look at PS5 Pro versus performance mode on PS5.
Thank you.
Both of which target 60 frames per second.
Now we're talking.
What we see here is a difference in detail.
Yeah, ew, gross. This is where those comparisons on like X are just not frankly fair. Because if this is hyper compressed, as you're watching this on a live stream in this full frame, you probably can't tell much of a difference. But if I zoom in and you look at the guy here, and then you compare it to him over here, there is a lot more detail in the chain behind him, the door. Here, it's almost completely lost. It's just like a solid object because the upscaler is trying to figure out what the hell to do with it. Whereas here, it's actually rendered out with much more detail. Up here in the trees and the windows, the brick especially, there's a lot more detail. In here, like this is very difficult to render. Very fine detail far away. Unpredictable detail too with the barbed wire. And if we go over here, you can see almost all of that is lost. Like the barbed wire just blends in with the green behind it. It's just gone. So there is a huge quality difference, but you really have to look for it. And I think that's again, the problem that people are going to have. If you're watching these videos on YouTube, or especially on like X where the compression's so horrible, you're not going to see any real detail difference. On my monitor here, I can immediately tell a difference here on the foliage and stuff. But again, is that enough to justify a $700 upgrade? To each their own.
PS5 Pro is much sharper and crisper than PS5.
Oh, the sharpness.
For this,
yeah, I mean, that's also a good side-by-side. Watch out, Ratchet. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I mean, just in the letters, like, look at the text. If we do a little side-by-side. Here, you can't even make out the word on the left side, whereas on the right, you can clearly make out Fedra. The windows just looks like a solid piece of, like, glass, whereas down here, you can see that there's an actual, like, wire crosshatch thing inside to reinforce it. So there is clearly a lot of detail that is present in the right on the PS5 Pro that is missing on the left to achieve 60 frames. Absolutely. When you zoom out to the shot before, are most people going to notice that or feel like that difference between this glass and this glass is worth a $200 price difference or a $700 upgrade? I think more people are going to be less convinced than more convinced, but
PS5 Pro is much sharper and crisper than PS5.
oh, the crispness.
For this, my favorite is the parade scene from Ratchet and Clank. Distant details are much clearer.
Yeah, this one's very clear cut. Absolutely. But whenever you have to zoom in that much to demonstrate the difference, chances are you at home will not notice the difference unless you're playing on, of course, you have to be playing on a 4K TV. But it has to be a big one. I used to sell TVs, as you guys know. I used to sell them at first through Best Buy and then with their like partner company that they bought out, Magnolia Home Theater, which sold all the luxury stuff. It's because like if you have a small TV that you sit 10 feet away from, doesn't really matter if that 40-inch TV is 4K or 1080p, you probably aren't going to see the difference from 10 feet back. Once you go to like 65 inches or 75 inches, a big TV, then you can start to see the difference when you go to 4K, which is why they encourage you to do that. Once you get to like 8K resolutions, the screen has to be the size of like a movie theater for it to even be visible to the naked eye. So it's just not that practical for most people. But with this stuff, like you're only really seeing detail differences and sharpness differences when you zoom in that much. So I think most people, if you're playing on like anything certainly below a 65-inch TV, you probably aren't even going to notice a difference, frankly. Like in terms of sharpness, I don't think you'll notice anything.
And here we can see Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is noticeably higher resolution throughout the scene, including the trees and procedural cars. So overall, some remarkable improvement to the games. On PS5 Pro, we can see increased sharpness to the graphics or smoother and more responsive gameplay. This is the big three showing their value.
Again, I just want to remind you that the GPU and ray tracing are basically the same thing. And then AI-driven upscaling is just upscaling, which again is like a shortcut to give you faster frame times by rendering at lower resolutions. So they're giving you a bigger GPU as these two, and then they're using their own proprietary upscaler so they can render at lower resolutions to get better frame rates.
As you've been seeing, machine learning via the PSSR library is being used quite broadly to add pixel detail and boost frame rate.
Dude, I really wish they would have just called it Pisser. Thanks to the Pisser library.
Power is being especially effective for Horizon Forbidden West. Apart from the detail boost, that extra graphics power is allowing for improvements to lighting and visual effects, as well as to the hair and the skin in cinematics.
Open up, guys. Dwarves.
Every time I see Horizon, I know a lot of people love it, but every time I see Horizon, I just think of like, stop trying to make fetch a thing. It's not going to be a thing. Stop. It's like, it's fine, but I don't think it's like this big. I don't know. I know I'm in my own bubble, but I'm not that crazy. Yeah, Jor loved this part. Jor's like, oh, thank God, Aloy's back.
Sorters.
God, I love Jor.
Enough for me.
Ray tracing is finding broad usage as well, particularly when the games are focused on higher frame rates. The faster hardware in PS5 Pro can make a real difference.
I'm sorry, when he talks, this is totally unrelated, and I'm sure, again, I've never met Mark Cerny. I'm sure he's an amazing guy. Seems like he's a legend. But the way he's talking to the camera makes me feel like he's describing how he's about to murder my entire family if I don't do what he wants. You know, it's like, you're going to go and deposit this money at the bank. Otherwise, your family is going to be strung. Like, I feel scared.
Higher frame rates. The faster hardware in PS5 Pro can make a real difference.
Doesn't he kind of give off supervillain energy? Just like a little bit? Just a little bit?
Allowing Gran Turismo 7 to add ray-traced reflections between the cars in gameplay, while continuing to support their targeted 60 frames per second. That boost in ray tracing is also delivering big wins for Hogwarts Legacy.
I'm actually low-key surprised that they did not reveal like anything specific during this. You know, I do think obviously this looks a lot better than the standard version on console. On PC, like this isn't that obviously that big of an improvement. On PC, I think the game even runs and looks better than this, but that's to be expected. But I was expecting them to at least have like Hogwarts Legacy Director's Cut. It's a brand new upcoming game, specially designed to take advantage of the PS5 Pro hardware, but like they don't have anything specific to showcase with this, which I found surprising. It does obviously look improved, so I'll give them that, but I was just expecting at least something, you know?
Allowing not only for better reflections and a greater variety of reflective surfaces, but also for further realism in the casting of shadows. I hope you've enjoyed this run-through of the technology behind PlayStation 5 Pro. Simply put, it's the most powerful console we've ever built, and a worthy addition to the PS5 family. Let me wrap this up by giving you a quick look at a number of games running on the new console.
And it is basically the PS5, but ribbed for our pleasure. And they're about to show the most insane thing of this entire reveal. Okay, in a minute, they're about to show the most insane thing as part of this reveal. I thought they showed it there, but not yet. They show some various games running on it. Again, like, it's just tough when there's no side-by-side because this is not a generational leap. So it doesn't feel like a huge improvement. And so you're looking for the difference. And honestly, like if you told me this was just a PS5 sizzle reel, I would have believed you. Nothing in here looks like it's exclusive to the PS5 Pro. It looks like just PS5 games that look pretty good and are running pretty well. And that's that. So I think it's going to be a tough sell for the people in the middle of the aisle. That said, there are a lot of people that will still buy this, and I still think that this is going to sell out everywhere, to be perfectly clear. Not just like YouTubers that are buying it so that when they review PS5 games, you know, it looks the best it can, which is par for the course. But I think there's going to be a lot of people that are just casual fans of the PlayStation that are going to be down to buy this, because I just think, you know, even other stuff that they've done has sold out surprisingly so. Like even the PSVR 2, they were having trouble keeping that in stock, and everybody kind of agrees that that's just dead. But speaking of dead, this little piece of information left me dead. Look at this. It is a $700 device. $700 in the US. Technically speaking, we'll get to the pricing in other countries in a minute, but $700 in the US. And they're not including the vertical stand, which I'm assuming is just a little piece of plastic. Even if it's metal, they're not including a vertical stand. And I don't know if you noticed with the PS5 Slim that they replaced the base PS5 with, they also changed the stand there. And now, like, if you want to put it horizontal, it's just like a little piece of plastic. It's not even like the big black disc that launched with the PS5 initially. So they've cheaped out even on the other variant. And it is an insanely bad look, in my view, to be cutting out something as simple as a vertical stand and trying to sell that to people separately. It just screams like our margins are so freaking tight, we have to milk you for every little bitty penny we can. Then they do this, and then the price reveal. $700 US. 700 pounds, 800 euros. Okay, let's just do a little comparison here, okay? Let's do this. Because some of you might be like, wait, those numbers don't really make sense, okay? $700, that should translate to about 635 euros. But they're paying 800. US without tax, EU with tax. US tax is not anywhere close to that. Sales tax is going to be different depending on where you live. Just in case you're not in the US, it's going to be different. Some areas it's 6%. Some places sales tax is 7%. It just depends on where you live. Some areas it's like 3%. It's just all over the place. But there's that for one. Even a store near me, they have like a shopping center, and there is a dedicated tax for the shopping center. It's like the only way they could get the city to let them build there. So literally, like there's a big road, and if you turn left on the road and go to those stores, you pay an extra, like on average, it's maybe an extra $1 per 150, $200 that you spend in added taxes, versus if you're on that road and you turn right and you shop in the shopping center opposite to the south, there is no tax there because of the way that they did it. It's really weird and like kind of crazy, but it's literally like that close. You turn left, you pay the tax, you turn right, you don't pay the tax. It's weird. Anyway, that's the thing in the US, absolutely. But the point is, this is well beyond what like Americans are effectively spending in terms of purchasing power. People spending euros for their PS5 Pro are spending a lot more in terms of purchasing power than Americans are. Okay, so just to be perfectly clear there, big difference. As for pound sterling, so again, $6.99 would translate roughly to 530 pounds sterling, but they're paying 700 pounds, which even when you factor in sales taxes, VAT taxes, even when you factor all of that in, people in the UK and people in Europe are spending a lot more for their PS5 Pro than Americans are, which is surprising. I did not expect it to be this much of a discrepancy. Usually it's like 700 in the US, and maybe it's like 750 effectively for people in the UK or in Europe or something. But there's a huge gap here, which is why, from what I can tell on social media, a lot of people are excessively upset if they live in the UK and EU about this announcement, because it's such a gap. As for yen, translates to about 842 US dollars, and that does include tax. So even there, like, if you buy a $700 device in the US, your final bill is not going to end up being $840. So everybody outside of the US is spending a lot more, which, I mean, America is pretty cool. So sorry, not sorry, but that is still a crazy gap. So what I want to do before we catch up on super chats and everything, shout out to the 2,700 people on YouTube, 100 people over on Twitch. Thank you guys for that. I'm going to do a poll. Okay. We're going to do a poll. This is anonymous. Okay. And all I'm going to ask is the PS5 Pro worth the price? I'll say the price, because depending on where you are, it's going to be different. The reason I'm asking is it worth the price is because I don't want you to answer whether you're buying it, because you might have just bought a PS5. You might be a PC only gamer. You might be an Xbox gamer. I don't want you to answer based on your purchase preference. Okay. I want you to answer this based on whether or not you think it's worth, based on what you've seen, $700 when the PS5 is available elsewhere, the Series X is available elsewhere. Okay. So that's why we're framing it that way. And all we're going to do is yes, no. That's all we're going to do. Okay. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to post it into the chats, and you guys can vote. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Do I think it's worth $700? No disk drive, which is something else we haven't really touched on while you guys are voting. There is no disk drive. If you want to buy that, that's an additional $80. So if you want a disk drive and a vertical stand In the US alone, you're probably going to end up spending well over $800. Okay. In Europe, that could take you all the way up towards $1,000 for this thing. Okay. So my personal estimation is that it's not worth this price point, having removed a lot of stuff. That's my opinion. If we look at results, let's see what you guys are saying. Well, I can't say I'm that surprised. I didn't think, honestly, it would be this big of a gap. I was expecting like maybe 70-80% of people would say no. I didn't think we'd be at 95%. Wow, that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Yeah, and more people voting. Yeah, keep voting. If you haven't voted, make sure to vote, because I want an accurate number. But it seems very expensive for what it's doing, because even then you gotta pause it, you gotta zoom in, spot the differences. 2 of the 3 big features are the same feature, and they've removed stuff like the disk drive and the vertical stand. One question I have they said what the size is? It's 2 terabyte? Yeah, it's 2 terabyte, comes with a DualSense controller and a copy of Astro's Playroom, not Astrobot, pre-installed, so just like the other ones. Should you want to add a disk drive, you can buy the separate drive for $80. I also don't think it looks very good. I just personally, I don't like these lines. I think that it looks really stupid, but that's just me. That's unrelated. Other features of the console include PS5 Pro Game Boost for backwards compatible PS4 games on the console. Okay, that's nice. It will also feature Wi-Fi 7. That's good. Much faster download times. Only if you have a supported router, though, to be perfectly clear. And Wi-Fi 7 routers are expensive. But then again, if you're spending this much money on a new console in the middle of a gen, maybe it's worth it. And VRR, that's a good feature to have. And 8K. I've heard a lot of people talk about the 8K, the 120 FPS thing. I do want to be clear. Anybody who knew anything about this stuff was laughing when they revealed like the 8K logo on the box. All that meant was, technically speaking, it's capable of outputting an 8K resolution through the cable. That's all they really said. Does anybody actually think that it's like reasonable to get 8K resolution? Like, no. Nobody actually needs that. Here, I'll post the link again for everybody, and I will pin it this time. That way you can vote. Hold on. Pin. I have pinned it. It's been pinned, and then pin. Okay. That way people who come in can vote. So there's that. There's also a calculator with, let's see, ideal TV distance to couch or something. Calculators. There's been things like that. Yeah, Artings. These guys are amazing. So for like an 8K resolution, this is based on a 4K TV, I believe. I believe that's what it is. Viewing distance, cinema. Like there's a lot of math that goes into it. So like here you can see optimal viewing distance based on the size of the television and resolution. For 4K, Ultra HD is worth it, depending on like, this is view distance versus the size of the display. So if you have a 55-inch TV and you're sitting about 3.5 feet away from it to like 4 feet, then it's optimal viewing distance. You'll be able to see that detail and actually appreciate it. 75-inch TV, you can sit about 4.5 feet-ish, and that's when you'll fully be able to, like, you just can't make out the pixels, but you can fully take in all of the detail and all of that. To get to the point where most people are sitting away from their TV, most people are like, 10, 20, maybe not 20, but they're probably like between 6 and 10 feet away from their display. If you have a 4K TV, in order to really make the most of that, you need to go to like 75, 85, 95 inches to actually like optimally take advantage of that resolution. Okay. For 8K, it's not even close to this. For 8K, the numbers are ridiculous. I've seen them before, and it's like, it's straight up stupid. Like 8K would be something like, it has to be, You have to sit so freaking close to it. At 100 inches, you have to sit 2 feet away from it to be able to see individual pixels. So it's just not practical. So the 8K resolution thing is just madness. It's nonsense as far as I'm concerned. But even then, they put it on the box. They talked about 120 frames and 120 FPS. To anybody who knew anything about this stuff, I think they were expecting pretty clearly that's only going to really apply to games that are like 2D side scrollers. Like obviously, The Last of Us Part 2 is never going to run at 120 frames. And anybody who thinks it is, like, I don't know if that's practical. But they still put it on the box, which either way, like it's the difference between like what a well-educated person in tech would understand is maybe an exaggeration versus what the average consumer is going to take away from that. And I think the average consumer saw all these things listed on the box of the PS5 and thought that's what they were going to be getting later in the generation. And now they're selling you a different thing for a lot more that has missing features like no disk drive, missing vertical stand, stuff like that. And they're saying this will now get you closer to achieving that goal that we told you we were going to try to achieve last time. And it leaves people feeling really ticked off because they feel as though this was supposed to be included last time around. Why are you just now like saying we can get to it in this way? It just doesn't make sense. And I think that this reflects the overall sentiment that most people feel, which is just like, are you kidding me? Like for real? The thing I can't really justify, the disk drive, okay, I think like maybe 80% of their users are buying things mostly digital, so maybe they can just justify it that way. The no vertical stand for a piece of plastic that probably cost them 2 cents to mass produce, that is ridiculous. Like that is nothing else than a chance to penny pinch every single little thing. Yeah, at Laserbeam, I think you're right. It comes off as an Apple move, and this comes on the back of Apple revealing their stuff. I didn't even watch the Apple event. Normally I find it fun to check out, but I didn't even watch it because I kind of forgot it was happening. But their whole thing also is like minimal improvements. It looks the same as before. Most of the improvements are being made on the software side this year. It's all like AI stuff. But again, it's put the buzzword on the product and hope people just go along with it, even though it's not been super clear. Like NVIDIA, or rather Sony is introducing this new PSSR, or as I think we were going to call it, the Pisser, the Pisser upscaler. They've introduced that, and that's supposed to make it so that they can achieve even higher levels of detail, right? That's the whole goal. They've previously used stuff like FSR, which is the AMD version of DLSS, basically. It's just their version of it. But now they're doing their first party thing because they think that they can either do it better. Maybe they just don't want to be beholden to AMD for this technology, so they're going to do their own thing. To me, it comes off as like their attempt at making their own thing to give investors a reason to throw money at them. Because right now on Wall Street, if you have anything even slightly adjacent to AI, investors will just throw hundreds of millions of dollars at you. It's ridiculous. It's insane. It is an actual bubble. There's no reason a company like NVIDIA should be trading on like 50 times earnings. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense mathematically. It is the same thing that happened with the dot-com bubble. It's insane. Not financial advice, just pointing out. But I think like this to me just screams, okay, this was a corporate decision to try and get your own stuff in there. Maybe it ends up being really good. Honestly, if it's better than FSR 2, amazing, because FSR has been a plague on a lot of recent games. And I'm saying this as somebody that really appreciates AMD as a company. But like FSR is just not anywhere close to what DLSS is capable of doing. And so I hope this is a lot better than that. But even then, like my question is, okay, imagine it's a multi-platform game like a Black Myth Wukong, for example. Their goal eventually is to come to Xbox as well, and at least come into PC and stuff. How does this, like, is this just another toggle in the settings basically on PC? Does it come to PC hardware as well? Because presumably if they're adding in PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, it's something that's going to come to their PC ports as well. Maybe not, but I would imagine so. So is this just going to be their new attempt at breaking into that AI upscaling field? And maybe somebody, if we have any developers in the chat, let me know. Are there any licensing fees associated with these things? I didn't think so. Because like my interpretation is in order to use these upscalers, you have to have the hardware. And so NVIDIA is like, no, you own an NVIDIA GPU. So you effectively have paid for access to the software. But do the game devs have to pay any licensing fee for it? They do pay a licensing fee for DLSS, you think? I'm not sure. Now, DLSS is not open source. PS5 has an AI accelerator for it. All that really means is that there's dedicated hardware on the device that specializes in neural network computations. That's the fancy way of saying it. It's pretty much commonplace in all modern hardware. It's nothing groundbreaking. Like iPhones have it and have had it for years. I remember like 3-4 years ago, Tim Cook going up on stage and, they talked about their neural network processing to specifically enhance pictures. And that was kind of before the AI boom, so they didn't call it AI, whatever, enhanced hardware, whatever. But that's like not at all a new thing. With all this, it's important to remember the basics, which is that consoles are not built to take on top of the line PCs. That's not what they're trying to do. This freaking supercomputer will outperform the PS5 Pro. It will probably outperform the PlayStation 6. Let's just be honest. But it costs way more, right? Like just the graphics card is more than like, at least when it launched, was more than like 2 PlayStation 5 Pros, okay? It's insane. And I don't say that to flex. My point is comparing the PlayStation 5 Pro to something like this is unreasonable. And you're of course going to find that the PC is superior because it better be. You paid a lot more for it. If this cost the same as a PS5 Pro, then it would be unreasonable. But to pretend as though they're one-to-one comparisons is ridiculous. And I know some people are saying for $700, you could just go and get a PC. Why buy a $700 PlayStation 5 Pro when you could just get a PC? And honestly, like a $700 PC with like a 2080 Ti in it, I think is going to be hard to find. I think that's going to be really hard to find. And you got to factor in the other stuff, which is that most people that are playing on console do not have like monitors, keyboards, mice and stuff. Like they don't have the rest of the setup. So for them, $700 to get an improved level of fidelity is a good deal. Even now, if we go on Newegg, you can see, of course, the 2080 Ti, my understanding is it's not manufactured anymore, but this one, 2080 Ti, you can get it used, very good condition for $450, shipped from Hong Kong, so you'll get it in like 6 months. Refurbished RTX 2080 Ti, this is the Asus Strix variant, 770, that seems pretty steep. You get a 3080 for $560. This is just NVIDIA. A lot of people have success on like Facebook Marketplace, but again, I'm just gonna say it. If you are not comfortable with freaking PC hardware, you're not gonna be going and buying used hardware off of Facebook Marketplace. And I know that there's some like PC gamers who are like, it's really easy to build a PC. I agree. I've built many PCs, okay? I'm not disagreeing with you, but let's be completely honest. For the average gamer who's used to gaming on a console, that is a huge undertaking. That is a mountain to climb, is to go and build a PC with new components, much less going and buying used components, which is pretty sketchy. I mean, I don't really buy used computer parts because I got burned with that once where I bought a used, it was like it was right around the time of Fallout 4. So like 2015, 2016, sometime in there. But I tried buying a used GPU and it worked for like a few months and then it just died one day. And it was like, oh yeah, no, some of these just have problems. It basically seemed like the guy knew that this was potentially going to crap out soon. So he sold it to me and I was the sucker that dealt with it. What GPU was it? I don't even remember. It was an AMD one. It wasn't like an NVIDIA graphics card, but yeah, I couldn't tell you. If I went back and like researched, I could probably find it. But yeah, it's just the point of all of this is that $700 for somebody that is a console gamer, probably, you know, it's certainly a premium product, but I don't think it's that huge of a leap to say that if somebody wants to have the most premium setup possible and they don't want to spend potentially $1,500 on a PC setup to get comparable performance, it's possible. And I've said many times, I think there is a market for premium console hardware. I do think there is a market for like an $800 console, a $1,000 console. I think there even is a market for like a $1,500 PlayStation if they were to do that. The point is, though, the performance and the offering has to be commensurate with that price. It has to be in line with it. And I feel that this PS5 Pro doesn't seem to be doing enough to justify even the $700 price tag. If you're going to buy a $1,500 PS5 Ultra, whatever, it better perform like a $1,500 PC at the very least. It better perform very, very, very well. It better be doing everything cranked out the ass. But I feel like this PS5 Pro for $700 is doing basically what the PS5 should have been doing from the start. It's like, so it just doesn't feel like it justifies that price point. And to remove little bitty things like the vertical stand and to remove the disk drive, to me just seems like penny pinching, margin enhancing BS. You know, it takes us back to the discussion that Hideki Totoki said, the new like CFO of Sony. He came in and reevaluated all of PlayStation, and I'm convinced he pretty much kicked Jim Ryan out and said, "You're gone," because he came in and saw that their margins were at 6%. And there's been many analysts who have talked about this, so don't think that I'm like breaking news here. But basically for every dollar that was being spent, or being taken in rather, you could say, it depends on how you frame it, but they should have been making about 20%, 20 cents a profit on each dollar of revenue that comes in, right? Like this is how much they should have been taking. Jim Ryan, the way he ran PlayStation, wasting so much money, they were down here. So is it Hideki? I don't know, Totoki, that guy. He came in and said, "What the hell is this? This is insane. No wonder we're struggling to hit our financial targets. For every dollar we take in, we're barely making anything on it because all of this is just being burned on projects like Concord, on the Last of Us Online project that didn't go anywhere, that got canned. All this money is being wasted. We need to widen that margin." So what does he do? He comes in, and now you're seeing the result of it. He's demanding higher margins. That vertical stand, yeah, it probably cost him 2 cents, but if we can sell it for $5 or $10 a pop to even a million people, that gives us a little bitty edge. That's just enough to make a little bitty difference. Oh, the disk drive, we could include it, but if we don't, then some people will buy it, and that will give us a little bit more. Just a little. Doing our own upscaling instead of relying on other companies. Maybe it attracts investors. Maybe it also means that we can license it out to other game developers. Okay, well, we get a little bit more. That's the whole thing with this. Like, it's so transparent what they're trying to do. They're just trying to widen margins however they can because Jim Ryan was a moron and screwed everything up for so many years that now they're trying to dig themselves out of the hole that he got them in. What could have been pretty easily a day of celebration and excitement, instead they showed off a piece of hardware that I'm sure is technologically very impressive, and I'm sure like Digital Foundry will come out and they'll show that, oh, it's actually very impressive and they're doing a lot of cool stuff here. But it doesn't matter what it does on paper. What matters is the after effect and the actual like quantifiable feeling and effect for consumers, because like YouTubers can zoom in 50 times to see the difference between these two side by sides. But if you're playing the console and you don't feel a difference, you don't see a difference, it doesn't frankly matter. And on the flip side, there's just no new games or any new content. Like they're showing games that are anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 years old in this little presentation to showcase what it's capable of. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, that was what, 2020 or 2021? It was pretty close to a launch title, right? Alan Wake 2, okay, that's a good one to show. An upcoming game, Assassin's Creed Shadows, that's coming. Spider-Man Hogwarts Legacy, that's a good showcase game. Again, I'm surprised that they're not showing off the director's cut version of the game, but that makes me think that that might be a little farther out than we previously thought, but it does look really, really good. So that's a fair one. But it's not like they're coming out swinging with Death Stranding 2 or anything. I thought for sure we were going to see something with Death Stranding 2 in this presentation. They'd be like, look at this amazing sequence only made possible with the power of the PlayStation 5 Pro and the PlayStation 5. And I thought for sure they were going to do that. But instead they're showing games like The Last of Us Part 2 from 2020, which again, still graphically very, very impressive. Nobody's doubting that, but it doesn't look like the leap that it needed to be. So a lot of people feel underwhelmed. And then to reveal that the vertical stand is sold separately is like a thumb in the eye. And then the price points, for some people, they're going to be spending, if they want the disc drive too, they'll be spending the equivalent in US dollars of over $1,000 to get this, which doesn't even feel like that big of a step forward. Yeah, it's got 2 terabytes. That's nice, but with the NVMe SSD, that's not actually that impressive. It's just really hard to figure out how to justify this. So available starting November 7th. They're bringing it. It's going to come. I don't know if this is one I will even bother getting, because honestly, like, the reason I would get it is to make it so when I play games on PlayStation 5 for review or for videos, it looks the best that it can. So we give every game its best possible chance to wow us, right? Like, there's a reason that I don't play games for review on like the Series S, right? I might test it on the Series S, but the vast majority of footage will be on like PC. But even this, like, there's no games coming out in the immediate term for this. So why buy it now? I legitimately don't know. Like, I'd get it and download some games I've already played 5 times over. It just, again, it reinforces the core idea at the center of PlayStation's previous strategy, which was that games sell consoles, not the console. Like, the console, yeah, it's important. People like more bells and whistles. People like more power. People like this or that. But if there's no games for your console, who cares? Yeah, surprise Bloodborne remake on Pro only. I mean, if this doesn't go well, they might become that desperate and try something crazy. But it just feels, again, like Sony is a ship that is rudderless right now. They don't have a visionary. They don't have a guy at the helm that understands the industry and understands gamers. And instead, they're just trying whatever they can to milk people for everything they're worth. And I mean, you see other stuff like this. Ex-Sony president Chris Deering has said that those affected by the recent industry layoffs should, quote, find a cheap place to live and go to the beach for a year. I think if you asked me to come up with an out-of-touch corporate statement about layoffs, I don't think I could come up with something this egregious. Like, oh my God. You know, it shows you just how out of touch these guys that are making these decisions are. The idea that, like, yeah, you got laid off. Just go to your third house in the Florida Keys and relax for a little while, like a year, and then get back out there and try to find a different job. It's like, sir, I can't pay my rent. It's like, oh, you can't pay rent. That's fine. Just sell some of your stocks. Sir, I don't have stocks. I don't even have a retirement account. I'm barely able to pay for my food, and I can't even afford health insurance. Well, go to the beach and think about it. I can't afford to go to the beach, sir. I'm going to be evicted and lose everything. Okay, well then don't go to your beach house. Go to your house in Aspen. I don't have a house at all, sir. Like, it's so out of touch. It's unbelievable. It's crazy. But the point is, like, yes, this is an ex-president of Sony. So it's not a current president. It's not like this is what the current guy's saying. But the point is, this guy was at one time in that position of power, and that's the type of person that is in that position even today. So you shouldn't be surprised when they're out of touch with this stuff, because they look at it and they're like, well, yeah, it's the vertical stands sold separately, but just buy it separately. It costs like nothing. It's like $10 or whatever they're going to sell it for. I don't know what they're going to sell it for. And everybody's like, well, no, the point is, like, it should be included. It does add up when you factor all this stuff in. But it's the same thing with, like, all of these big companies that are releasing, like, half-assed, buggy, broken games for for $70, because for them, $70 is nothing. They're like, yeah, no, it's $70. Like, I spent that on a box of what's the name of that supermarket in, it's like San Fran or something, where it's like, you know, $70 for a box of strawberries. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Have you heard of that place? Irwin, is that it? Is that what it's called? Like, this is one of those like weird niche like hipster stores. Organic strawberries, 1 pound, $7. That's not the one I saw. Oh yeah, like these, $25 for a box of strawberries, like $25. I saw one video where somebody's like, I'm gonna go into Erewhon and buy just lunch. I'm just gonna get lunch. And they went in there and they tried to get just like a sandwich and a drink, and they ended up spending like $130. Like, how the hell did that even happen? Like, oh, I bought an apple, and this apple happened to be $15 or something. But like, that's the level of out of touch that like some people are at. It's funny, Katy Perry is here. Yeah, like Katy Perry. You know, it's like Katy Perry is the type of person shopping here. And the people that shop here are the ones that are deciding what this stuff should be priced at. And so no wonder. Anyway, with all this stuff, we'll see when it comes out in November. I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised they announced it this far in advance. As far as I know, there aren't pre-orders open or anything. I don't know if they're even going to do pre-orders. So there's that. He took my thing.